Radio Philippines Network Incorporated, DXKO. 13 sa Zinday Utso sa dial sa inyong radyo. RPN DXKO, ang Radyo Ronda dili sa Dakbayan sa Cagayan de Oro. Sibiyahan na may galaon sa katawhan, andang mo serbisyo sa tanan. Ang RPN DXKO Radyo Ronda sakop sa KBP, kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas.
Asia and other claimant countries and China will get an ASEAN-China meeting on March 31st to April 3rd. Locsin and counterparts from Indonesia and Thailand will discuss regional and international issues with China. But whether or not recent incidents in the West Philippine Sea would be raised or tackled in the special meeting is still up in the air. Beijing defends its actions in Scarborough Shoal, calling it an inherent territory with sovereign rights and jurisdiction in the area. China adds the Philippines should respect its rights and avoid interfering with the patrol and law enforcement activities of the Chinese Coast Guard. On the other hand, Malacanang reiterates the country has full sovereignty over Scarborough Shoal. Japan has also expressed its support or position in the Scarborough Shoal. It said that any form of coercion or use of force in the region is unacceptable. Back to you, Pia.
Tristan Adalo there reporting. As campaign rallies of presidential candidate Vice President Leni Robredo drew record-breaking crowds, her daughters are fully aware of the realities on the ground, a sobering reminder that there's so much work to be done. Our Anjo Alimario joins one of Robredo's daughters in her house-to-house campaign.
Po ni Leni Robredo, hindi po kami tulong. Pasensya na istorbo namin po.
At 7 in the morning, Trisha Robredo is already busy moving from one house to another in Barangay Tandang Sora, Quezon City, bringing her mother closer to the people. A few days ago, the second daughter of presidential candidate Vice President Leni Robredo gave supporters a reality check that it's not all sunshine and rainbows. They've been heckled while conducting house-to-house campaign.
Siyempre, human din kami. Medyo masakit din sometimes. Pero alam naman natin na hindi sila yung kalaban. So tuloy lang po talaga sa laban. Bigger goal lagi at hand.
Based on pre-election surveys, Robredo is still a distant second behind former Senator Bongbong Marcos. That's why Robredo's daughters are doubling efforts to reach as many people as possible. Conversion, Trisha admits, doesn't happen overnight. Rather, it's a process. But they're not alone in this fight. Volunteers from a nearby church joined Trisha. 100 of them have been regularly and patiently visiting communities for more than a month now.
Okay lang po. Kahit ako pagod, sige pa rin. Para sa kanya.
Kasi pag siyang manalo, lahat po hanggang laylayan, dala, paangat. Kaya kami po walang bayad.
Nanay Leonilia says she's already decided.
Sana po naging siya. Siya ang si Leni.
Just behind her, a Marcos tarp is displayed.
Lagay lang sila ng lagay. Tabing po sa ulan, init.
Robredo appeals to volunteers not to give up on non-supporters. While it was a hard decision to reach to allow their mom to run again, they're now all in.
Pakiramdam po namin magkakapatid, parang kasalanan na hindi namin siya ipairam ulit kung alam namin na siya yung pinakarapat-dapat naman mamuno ng ating bayan.
Anjo Alimario, CNN Philippines.
On to other presidential candidates. The Nacionalista Party is officially endorsing the tandem of Bongbong Marcos and Sara Duterte. Marcos was a member of the Nacionalista before joining the Partido Federal ng Pilipinas. The NP is led by businessman Manny Villar and his wife, Senator Cynthia Villar. Their son, former Public Works Secretary Mark Villar, is running on the Marcos Duterte Senate slate. Manila Mayor Isko Moreno meeting with representatives of Elon Musk's company SpaceX. They discussed the Manila government's acquisition of the so-called Starlink internet broadband, which is the first for any city in Southeast Asia. Moreno plans to put up more than 1,000 satellites in almost 900 villages, more than 100 public schools, and in some hospitals and police stations. Senator Manny Pacquiao also met with SpaceX officials today. They discussed how foreign firms can now enter the country's internet technology market more easily through new amendments in the Public Service Act. Pacquiao previously met with SpaceX officials last January. And that the two are supposedly hiding ill-gotten.
Respetuhin yung request natin at pakiusap natin
maruming
para
niyang
hanapin.
The predicate offense in this case is corruption. The predicate offense in this case is hoarding and hiding ill-gotten wealth, which is already a finding that's filed under the executory as from 2003. The Anti-Money Laundering Council of the Philippines can actually act on its own, motu proprio, or complainants can file complaints before the Anti-Money Laundering Council to investigate Marcos Jr. for money laundering.
The Marcoses have yet to respond to CNN Philippines' request for comment. Want to know more about where presidential candidates stand on various issues? Catch the Commission on Elections' second presidential debate, where 9 out of the 10 contenders will answer pressing questions on government accountability, foreign relations, safety, and security. That's this Sunday, April 3rd at 7 in the evening. And don't miss out on our pre-debate special hosted by yours truly at 6:30 in the evening that same night, only here on CNN Philippines. Apart from facing discrimination, people with disabilities and rare health conditions are sometimes neglected and left in the dark by health institutions. Stanley Gaheta sheds light on the situation of the sector on the sidelines. Parents and guardians provided consent and permission to CNN Philippines to share their stories of their children with special needs.
Only a few Filipino children suffer from these rare diseases. Their situation is made worse not only by expensive medication or treatment, but also by a society that discriminates against them.
According to World Health Organization, about 10% of newborns have disabilities. In the Philippines, there are nearly 2,000 babies with Down syndrome per year. Jasmine's daughter Julia is one case. She also has congenital heart disease.
Both side ng family namin, ako at ng husband ko, wala pong Down syndrome. Kaya nangangapa kami kung ano ba yon.
Down syndrome is a genetic condition of people born with an extra copy of the 21st chromosome. But Jasmine can't accept that a medical institution can be that tactless about the plight of a PWD.
Meron parents, sabi niya sa cardio, nabasa ko lang po, Dok, alam niyo po ba, sabi sa husband ko, hindi daw nila masyadong inaasikaso si Down syndrome dahil hindi daw po kabilang sa mundo.
Jasmine looked for organizations, government agencies, and politicians who can extend help for the medical operation of her daughter, costing about 800,000 pesos. Angelita looks after her 13-year-old nephew Vincent, who has a mild cerebral palsy, a disorder that affects movement and muscle tone, including posture caused by immature development of the brain.
Yung kabilang part ng katawan niya, left part, talagang weak to the point na hindi niya naihawak. Tapos may mga visible na deformity lalo pag naglalakad yung bata.
Vincent is undergoing a lifelong therapy and has enrolled in a special school for skills learning. He is also suffering from bullying.
Ang pagbubuli po sa akin ay parang pananakit. At tapos, laging pinagsasalitaan ng masasama.
Angelita believes less attention is being given to the likes of her nephew.
Pag ganitong sitwasyon, masyadong complex kasi unang-una, pag lumapit ka sa government, pupunta ka sa isang medical institution, ganun. Hindi ganun kadali yung process. Let's say, kukuha ka pa lang ng appointment sa neuropedia o isang specialist. Aabuti ng ilang buwan bago ka mabigyan.
What should the next administration do to further address their needs and lessen their burden on medical requirements? When will majority of us fully understand that persons with disabilities should have their place where humanity resides? Stanley Gayate, CNN Philippines.
Officials are taking things one step at a time amid the new normal. The government continues to ramp up vaccinations in areas with low coverage, particularly the Bangsamoro region. But private schools are appealing for more relaxed rules ahead of their return to physical classes. Stay tuned to CNN Philippines. Welcome back to CNN Philippines. Prices at the pump again soared by up to nearly 10 pesos today. Kusi Matulak reports some public transport drivers are taking more trips to make ends meet.
Deformity, lalo pag naglalakad yung
Another
bata.
beeline for motorists at this service station in Mandaluyong City to beat a new round of fuel price increase at 6 a.m. Motorists say they have no choice but to factor in unpredictable pump prices in their routines.
Nangangamba kami dahil siyempre apektado rin naman, 'di ba? Kahit sino naman siguro pagdating ng mga nagkataas yung na rin nagpapanik din sila.
Siyempre hindi masaya, pero wala tayong magagawa eh. Kailangan natin mag-adjust. Kung kailangan umalis na maaga, alis na maaga para mabawi yung nawawalang pera dahil sa gas.
In the new round of price increase, the public transport sector takes another hit since diesel is now more expensive than gasoline. Diesel now sells for 70 pesos per liter and gasoline at 69 pesos. While public utility drivers have been given a one-time fuel subsidy, they are hoping for a fair hike to cope with rising prices.
Dapat sana itaas po nila kasi talagang mababa yung namin. Wala kami maiuwi, halos pamilya. Kahit wala na po yung ayuda, basta may taas lang yung pamasahe.
Kahit hindi na magtaas, babaan na lang po ang presyo ng diesel. Oo, kasi makaka-accommodate yan lahat yan eh. Ma-afford namin lahat yan.
Transport regulators recently denied the provisional 1 peso fare hike petition of transport groups. They say there must be a balance between the interests of commuters and the transport sector. Meanwhile, the main petition seeking for a 5 peso increase in the minimum fare is still pending. As a stopgap move to ease commuter concerns, the government carries out this week free rides at MRT3 and EDSA bus carousel. But one transport group says only a few benefit from the free trips.
May libreng sakay, pero merong hindi kasama. Pero po, ang pag-disburse po ng LTFRB, inaabot po ng buwan bago kami makasingil o bago kami mabayaran. Baon na po kami sa utang sa mga gasolinahan.
The government is giving subsidy worth 6,500 pesos each to the more than 300,000 drivers and operators nationwide. Kusi de Matulak, CNN Philippines.
Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergere says new cases may drop to as low as 70 per day next month. Vergere explains this is based on several factors, including vaccination rate, waning immunity of vaccines, and pre-pandemic level mobility. She says projections may change if other risk factors come into play, like potential new variants.
Kung ano yung current mobility patterns at saka yung compliance to minimum public health standards at saka vaccinations natin ay pareho lang. By April 30, nationally, we will have daily cases of 70 hanggang 268. Pero kapag bumaba ang compliance, aabot ang ating national daily cases by 670.
The country remains at minimal risk for COVID-19, but the DOH is monitoring the Cordillera region where there was a slight increase in the positivity rate. Meanwhile, the Bangsamoro region still has the lowest vaccine coverage in the country. This prompted the government to conduct special vaccinations. But as Caroline Bonkin tells us, the region is still facing hurdles in inoculating people.
The special COVID-19 vaccination days in the Bangsamoro region starts on Tuesday. But unlike in other regions, there are hardly inoculations in some areas we visited like Datu Odin Sinsuat and Cotabato City. Lack of manpower, financial and logistical resources slow down the immunization here. A BARM Health Ministry official says they have no dedicated COVID vaccinators. That's why health workers can only administer vaccines on either this Wednesday or Thursday to give way to other health services.
They are actually handling 44 programs of the Department of Health in one person. That is why hindi naman po pwede na isakripisyo po natin yung kanilang other trabaho.
Security is also a concern.
Some areas are not really going on an 8 to 5 vaccination. May mga lugar na very hard to reach areas na hindi ka pwede magabihan kasi these places are sometimes infested with yung mga lawless elements.
Some have to travel 16 hours to reach far-flung areas. All BARM provinces have only vaccinated below half the target, with Danao del Sur at the bottom with only 21% coverage. Getting the right message to people, especially in remote areas, is a priority here. We've talked to some unvaccinated residents. Most of them don't want to go on camera, but many tell us they're afraid of the side effects they read on social media or hear from friends and neighbors.
Natatakot lang, ma'am. Yung makukuha ko, baka makukuha akong sakit dyan sa bakuna.
So, yung iba, nababalitaan ko na may maraming namamatay. Yung mga kapitbahay namin, balitaan nila na may namamatay.
By Raisa, her parents and 9 siblings are all unvaccinated. Despite explaining that no vaccine-related deaths have been reported in the Philippines, by Raisa says she will only get the shot if her siblings get it first or if it becomes a requirement for in-person classes. Despite these challenges, BARM health officials hope to vaccinate 86,000 people until Thursday. They have the usual vaccination sites and conduct house-to-house visits, but they will focus their resources in areas with the lowest vaccine coverage. Caroline Bonkin, CNN Philippines.
The province of Cebu also holding a special vaccination campaign today until March 31st. You're seeing on your screens the 12 priority areas for the rollout. Health workers are going house to house to achieve the target of 40,000 doses. Officials aim to focus on senior citizens in Cebu, which has the lowest vaccine coverage for that group at almost 40%. With vaccinations and the downgrade of alert levels, limited in-person classes are back. But for some private schools, shifting from virtual to physical is a challenge because of requirements set amid the pandemic. AC Nichols has that story.
Sixth grader Zabril Pan goes to a private school in Mandaluyong City. Classes are still fully online, but he cannot wait to attend in-person classes.
Pag online class, mahirap. Mahirap focus kung naglalag yung teacher.
Department of Education data shows only about 200 private schools have started face-to-face classes. A group of private schools hopes for an easier application process. As per guidelines, schools have to go through a validation process to hold in-person classes. The DepEd safety assessment tool lists requirements such as the installation of hand washing facilities, that teachers should be fully vaccinated.
We need to submit everything first and it has to be checked. Ilan lang ba ang empleyado rin sa DepEd na that are also in charge of doing this, and considering that they also need to do other things sa division and sa region. So I think it slows down the process.
Most private schools will not hold in-person classes until next school year, according to the Coordinating Council of Private Educational Associations of the Philippines, or COCOPEA. Some issues need to be discussed with parents.
Yung mga parents ng ibang bata, syempre, tinatanong din yun, lahat ba ng papasok ay vaccinated? Kasi kung hindi, they wouldn't also volunteer. And at the same time, what do we do with those unvaccinated? Do we require them to just submit a negative RT-PCR or antigen, and at whose cost, no?
Education officials are now finalizing new guidelines for the expanded implementation of face-to-face classes to align with the current situation. The safety assessment tool will be made easier for schools to comply. Economic managers, meantime, are pushing to fully resume in-person classes, saying it would be a huge help in boosting the economy. Parents have mixed reactions about this. Some, like Zoila Pablo, are in favor.
Sabi ko nga, online na nga lang, hindi pa kayo pumapasok. Sabi nila, mama, ayaw namin ng ganyan kasi hindi kami natututo. Puro parang pandaraya lang ba? Kasi pwede daw silang magtanong sa magulang. Minsan ako gumagawa.
While others are not comfortable sending their kids back to the classrooms just yet.
Hindi pa rin sure. Baka mamaya biglang mag-increase na naman yung COVID sa bansa.
Simply put, the DepEd believes blended learning is the future of education. AC Nichols, CNN Philippines.
Coming up, Will Smith has apologized to the Academy, his fellow nominees, and now the comedian himself, whom the actor slapped at the Oscars. And grim news for BTS fans. Another member tests positive for COVID. Details after the break. Welcome back. Actor Will Smith apologizes to Chris Rock after yesterday's shocking slap on the Oscar stage. In an online post, Will says the joke about his wife, Jada's medical condition, her alopecia, caused him to react emotionally, but that his actions were not indicative, he said, of the man he wants to be. The Academy says it condemns what Will did, adding that it has begun a formal review of the incident where it will explore further action. Kpop updates now. Jungkook of BTS tests positive for COVID-19 upon arriving in Las Vegas for their Grammy gig. The group's agency says Jungkook has a mild sore throat and is being treated while in self-quarantine. All 7 BTS members have contracted the virus in the past 4 months. The chart-topping group is scheduled to perform at the Grammy Awards on Monday, Philippine time, but Jungkook's participation is still up in the air depending on COVID regulations in Las Vegas. Well, speaking of BTS, another group joins them and Super M as the only Korean artists to top the Billboard 200 albums chart. Stray Kids landed at #1 with their first ever entry on the list, Ordinary. They also had the highest pure album sales in the US this year at 103,000 copies. Well, speaking of milestones, Taylor Swift is adding another honor to the list, this time from New York University. NYU will award the singer with an honorary doctorate of fine arts at the class of 2022's graduation ceremony on May 18th. Swift will also deliver the commencement address. This is not the first time the university recognized Swift's influence. NYU has offered a course on her work. And that is it for now. Join me again on Politics as usual from 8 to 9 p.m. tonight. I'm Pia Ontiveros for Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.
Radio Philippines Network Incorporated, DXKO. 13 sa utso sa dial sa inyong radyo. RPM DXKO, ang Radyo Ronda dili sa Dakbayan sa Cagayan de Oro. Sibiyahan na may galaon sa katawan, andam mo serbisyo sa tanan. Ang RPM DXKO Radyo Ronda sakop sa KBP, kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas.
He was a human rights lawyer, then went on to become the spokesperson of President Rodrigo Duterte, and now a senatorial candidate under the slate of Bongbong Marcos, the son of the late dictator. Harry Roque joins us live as we get up close on his plans and platforms, as well as his stand on issues. Harry, great to have you with us on The Final Word. First of all, let's talk about jobs, employment, rising prices of fuel and basic commodities. If you are voted into the Senate, one of the 12, what will you do in terms of legislation to jumpstart the economy and create more jobs?
Well, you see, it's unfortunate that we have a confluence of very unfortunate events. No? You still have many provinces that still have to recover from Typhoon Odette, and then you have the pandemic, as well as a conflict in Europe that has caused prices of everything to go up. Naturally, government should use the national budget as an instrument to promote jobs, as well as to control inflation. I think the government is doing the correct thing right now. They're giving ayuda to the poorest of the poor, as well as giving gasoline subsidies to farmers and fisher folk.
Is the ayuda of 200 pesos sufficient, or is it right to raise it to 500 pesos?
The president ordered rightfully that it be raised to 500. I wish it could be more, but as you know, you can't spend money that you don't have unless you resort to borrowing again. But so I agree with the move of the president to defy the advice of his economic team and actually gave more than double than what was advised.
But Harry, there are also some allies of the president who are calling for a temporary suspension of the fuel excise tax. So it will impact more Filipino people rather than targeted subsidies and dole-outs. Do you think that we should suspend it?
Well, I see the wisdom in not suspending it right now because in the first place, the ayuda is also made possible because of the excise tax. And I would like to stress that excise tax actually taxes everyone, including those that use the gasoline. No? So I think to forgo with the excise tax will only benefit those who can actually afford the higher prices of gasoline. And that's why that's a form of indirect taxation,
But a
which
lot
I think is
of
more...
critics are also saying, Harry, that with the subsidies and with these dole-outs, it also opens it up to corruption because it is distributed by government officials.
There will always be problems, but government has to do something because it did not create a conflict in Europe. It just has to cushion the impact of the conflict, and hopefully it will not last long. No? But what I'm saying is, I think it's a right move, ayuda as well as subsidies. No? Long term, perhaps we should look at the excise tax, but as of now, what I'm saying is, for the immediate future, perhaps we would need the extra revenues generated by the excise tax precisely because we have to provide subsidies as well as ayuda.
But they say that the ayudas and these dole-outs, these subsidies, are not enough sa araw-araw na pangangailangan ng ating mga kababayan. So now, there is a clamor to raise the minimum wage to 750 pesos per day. Even Senate President Tito Soto said it should be 1,000 per day.
Alam mo, talagang hindi enough. What we're trying to do is cushion. Bigyan ng konting, kumbaga, remedyo. No? It will never be enough. But, you know, we're hoping that the conflict in Europe, of course, will end soon. No? And that's why I have got on record to say that because of the close friendship of the President to Vladimir Putin, and because of the effect on the Philippine economy as well as the worldwide economy, perhaps the President should be one of the peacemakers. No? Because we need this conflict to end, because that is ultimately the solution to inflation brought about by the conflict. No? So it's never enough, but government must do something. I think as of now, the status quo as far as the regional wage boards should be allowed to work because legislated minimum wage at a time when we are still recovering from the pandemic and facing inflation because of the conflict in Europe may just lead to increased unemployment.
You talked about President Duterte wanting to be a mediator. Is he really serious about that? Mediating between President Putin, President Zelensky, and the West?
He may not be because it's my suggestion. I would want him to give it a shot. Why? Because he's one of the few friends, I think, right now of President Putin. No? And perhaps President Putin will listen to him.
Why is he continuing to take a neutral stance against Russia when almost all the countries have said this has to stop?
Well, as a matter of record, Rico, no, we voted in favor of the resolution condemning the invasion as illegal, as in fact it is. But he's taking a neutral stand because in the past, when it's the West breaching international law, resorting to unilateral use of force, we don't get this kind of protest that we are hearing now against Russia. No? They invaded Iraq, and yet, despite the fact it was equally illegal under international law, there was some protestations, but not as loud as we have now. And I think the President's point is, while it is illegal, we need to understand also the motivations of Russia. I'm not justifying it, but in the mind of Russia, under international law, self-defense is a lawful instance when you resort to unilateral force. I think it's wrong, but they're thinking that if Ukraine becomes a member of NATO, then it becomes a threat to them. I reiterate that's wrong because the definition of an armed attack for which we could use resort to self-defense is the sending of troops across international borders. No? But what can you do? That's how they feel about it.
Let's get now to another issue, especially now during this campaign season, Harry, and this is about vote buying. There's been criticism on various camps that they're buying votes. They're paying for people to attend rallies in this province, in this city, here and there. If you become senator, how can we strengthen our laws on vote buying?
I think all the laws are in existence. We need to improve the implementation. And that's
so why is there not enough implementation? Why is there not enough enforcement if it's already strengthened in the laws?
Well, I think the COMELEC should flex its muscles. They do have the authority to order the PNP and the AFP even, no, to implement our elections laws. No? So they should just do it.
On another important issue right now is the fight, the war on drugs. Should it continue to adopt, the next administration, should it continue to adopt an ironclad, no-nonsense anti-drug policy, just like what President Duterte did?
Well, I think even the United Nations, no, it is in the agenda. We should have an unrelentless effort to curb trade in illegal drugs. There can be no substitute.
Mm-hmm. And of course, if you become senator this coming May 9th, what will be the first bill you will file when you sit in the Senate?
I would say it would first be the what I promised, the provinces ravaged by Typhoon Odette, no, which is a supplemental budget bill, because I know that the provision of the 2022 budget is not sufficient, not just even for purposes of rebuilding homes, more importantly, reviving livelihoods. Then we would have to look at health, because that's my pet law when I was a congressman. I authored universal healthcare law, and I'm now convinced that the only way universal healthcare law will work is if we abolish PhilHealth, replace it with a National Health Service, because it will achieve two things: get rid of the corrupt ones in PhilHealth, and number two, emphasize that universal healthcare is not the same as PhilHealth of the past. It is not just medical insurance. We will not rely on the premiums alone for benefits. We will use government funds to promote the right to
So
health.
why wasn't it done in this administration?
Well, I authored universal healthcare, and in my version, I wanted to abolish PhilHealth. Unfortunately, the author of the Senate version of the bill was Ralph Recto, who was also author of the PhilHealth law. So come, I think it was around March of 2019, when Congress was about to go on recess, I made a judgment call. I passed our version in the House as early as September of 2017. And March 2019, nothing was happening in the Senate. So I called a meeting in Malacanang. I was already spokesperson. And I agreed by way of compromise, okay, let's retain PhilHealth, but let's provide for accountabilities. Accountabilities which prove inefficient or not insufficient, because obviously no one has been fired from PhilHealth. We still have ghost claims, and we still have hospitals complaining that their valid claims have not been settled by the agency.
So, Harry, it is clear what your legislative priorities will be if you become senator after May 9th. But there are also a lot of question marks why you joined the Marcos Duterte Senate slate, because you are known to be a human rights lawyer, anti-Marcos, a Marcos activist. So why are you part now of the Marcos Duterte tandem? How do you reconcile the past of Marcos with your decision to join this tandem?
Because the sin of the father is not the sin of the son. I made my due diligence. Bongbong Marcos has not been convicted of any crime involving graft and corruption. He has not been convicted, even accused of human rights violations. And there's been decisions in the U.S. pursuant to the Alien Tort Claims Act for human rights violations. And it is the Marcos himself, and of course, when he died, his estate, no, that is being made to pay, but not Bongbong Marcos himself.
But didn't you even consider his father's sins? His father being a dictator. Thousands were killed, tortured, and jailed. There were so many Marcos atrocities. And he was in the home of his father in Malacanang. Did that even cross your mind?
It did, and I realized that he should not be made accountable for whatever his father did. In the same way that I will not be responsible for whatever my father did.
What about the unpaid taxes of the Marcoses? The BIR is charging him more than 200 billion pesos. Shouldn't he be paying those taxes before he runs for president?
You know,
or even before he's elected?
There's a saying, there's only two certain things in life: death and taxes. Government has all the remedies if it wants to collect. Let government collect.
All right. Here's another issue. I did a little bit of research on your background. You are a top debater, an award-winning debater. And you mentored and coached the UP College of Law moot teams that won in various international competitions, particularly those in Oxford, one of the best schools and debating clubs in the world. But the tandem that you support, Bongbong Marcos and Sara Duterte, do not even want to participate in any of the debates, just like what we had here on CNN Philippines. Why not you as a top debater coach them for them to join these debates,
Well,
Harry?
you know, I'm no longer a debate coach because I've ceased to become
But you are
an
a top
academic.
debater.
Yes, but number one, it's not my business to speak for them. You should ask them. The first and last time I agreed to be spokesperson was for President Duterte, and I'm sorry, I have no authority to speak either for Bongbong Marcos or for Inday Sara. They have spokesperson. So I think they should be the ones to answer on behalf of the principals. No? As far as I'm concerned, I join every forum, including this current forum, because I think it's important that people should know my legislative agenda, if only because I'm convinced that if they know my legislative agenda, they know that I can do more than dance.
But shouldn't your candidate for president and vice president also be up on the stage with all the presidential candidates who have showed up in the presidential forums and also the vice presidential forums? Would you not advise them to join so that at least they can debate, they can rebut all the issues against them and not just be part of one-on-one interviews?
What's interesting is they didn't ask for my opinion. I did not give my
Shouldn't
opinion.
you be giving them your opinion being a top debater?
Not
Harry?
really, because I'm only an adopted candidate, no? So it's not my business. It's their lookout. They know that there may be ramifications, and they're willing to face the ramifications for their refusal to debate, no? But the point I'm making is, at the time of the internet, and precisely because we have mass media, if you want to know the platforms of candidate, you will, and not just through debates.
And of course, yesterday we saw the PDP Laban Kusi wing endorsing Bongbong Marcos for president. You were the former presidential spokesperson of Duterte. He hasn't said anything yet, but if you are inside his mind, will he still be anointing a presidential candidate, or will he just stay away or eventually go with the PDP Laban Kusi wing?
I'm
Harry?
so sorry. I'm no longer a spokesperson. I have
But
no
you were
authority.
with him for many
Despite
years.
that, I had an obligation to speak for him, but I ceased to have that obligation and right to do so. So I suggest you ask the president directly because I have no authority to speak for him.
Well, Martin Andanar has said that the decision of the PDP Laban Kusi wing is not necessarily the decision of President Duterte. Harry, we will take this short break and we'll continue our up-close conversation with Harry Roque right after this. And we'll also have updates on the COVID-19 situation overseas, with South Korea reaching 10 million cases in total. And as we go on a quick break, we give you an update on the ongoing cleanup of the Pasig and Tulyahan rivers. This is the final word on CNN Philippines. Thanks for joining us. I'm Rico Hizon. Still with us tonight for an up-close conversation is senatorial candidate and former presidential spokesperson, Harry Roque. Harry, we have more questions for you, no? And particularly on social media about your dancing on TikTok. There are pros and there are cons. Do you really have to dance to be able to impart your legislative agenda to the Filipino people?
I think so, because people know that I was an associate professor of law at the UP College of Law, visiting scholar at National University of Singapore, an adjunct professor at American University. I have nothing to prove by way of capability as far as being a lawyer, being a legal scholar, and being a legislator is concerned. But because I was spokesperson for the longest time, and many people know me only as a spokesperson, they think I'm a very ferocious person, which actually affects my likability. So by dancing, I show them that I am not the ferocious person that you see who was presidential spokesperson. That's why I insist I will never be spokesperson for anyone again. And that's why I'm sorry I'm not able to answer many of your questions already.
But Harry, this election is not about entertainment. It's about, serving the people, addressing their current issues,
Yes.
pandemic response, employment, jobs, food, power, protecting their rights.
Of course, I address those two and I dance. And of course, the dancing captures the interest so that after my dancing, they listen to what I have to say.
So, this is a gimmick, this entertainment, this singing. Will you also be singing? Is the
Well,
next question.
I don't have a voice for it, so I can't sing. But we're both communicators. And when there's about 13 or 14 people who will speak, and it's going to be worse because there's going to be local candidates beginning the 25th, you need to capture the attention of the people. And that's what I'm doing. It's part of improving communication between the audience and myself. And of course, people on the internet may not like it, but I can assure you, I always ask the audience, do you still want me to dance? And they all clamor for it, so I do.
We are in the last 1 minute of our interview for this up-close conversation with you, Harry, and we will be asking you about 10 questions, yes or no, no explanation. Just give us your direct answer if it's a yes or a no. Should we repeal the oil deregulation law?
Yes.
Are you in favor of reviving the Bataan nuclear power plant?
No.
If you become senator, will you make it mandatory for yourself, the vice president, and members of Congress to reveal their statement of asset, liabilities, and net worth to the
Yes.
public? Will you allow the International Criminal Court to investigate President Duterte?
No.
Do you favor the reimposition of the death penalty for drug-related crimes?
No.
Do you favor resuming peace talks with the communist rebels?
No.
Will you allow joint exploration of the West Philippine Sea?
Yes.
Should the country be more aggressive in protecting its maritime interests in the West Philippine Sea?
No.
And finally, Harry, your final word on why our kababayans should vote for you this coming May 9th as one of the 12 senators of the Republic.
Being a senator means writing laws, drafting policies. I think I have proven myself not just as a lawyer, but also as a professor of law, as a student of law, as well as someone who has used the law to accord justice to victims of injustice. I've also proven myself as a lawmaker. I was primary author of universal health care, free irrigation, free lunch for malnourished children, the AIDS law, and one of the proponents of the free college tuition for state universities and colleges. So I know the law, I use the law for justice, and I've used the law for policy that has provided genuine change in the Philippine society. That's more than enough reasons for the people to elect me into the Senate.
Senatorial candidate Harry Roque, thank you so much for joining us on The Final Word.
Thank you very much as well.